Flusterstorm is getting printed directly into Modern. Let's talk about that. Everyone, this is Nikachu, Merfolk Master, and on this channel I give competitive Modern Merfolk advice, but I'm also really well in tune with the Modern metagame, and I keep up to date with the changes of it. And if you're a Modern Merfolk player, or if you're not a Modern Merfolk player, you're going to find something valuable out of this channel, so don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Well, anyway, Modern Horizon spoilers are coming out, and one of the first biggest ones that came out was Flusterstorm. Flusterstorm is a blue instant that basically copies itself for each card that has been played that turn, counters instants or sorceries unless their opponent pays 1. It's been a staple in Legacy for an incredibly long time. Very important card in all the toolboxes of the blue decks. All those Brainstorm, Ponder, Delver decks, combo decks, they all want to play Flusterstorm. So is this card appropriate in Modern? Is it going to make a big impact? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, let's talk about what makes Flusterstorm so good in Legacy. And the first and foremost is that it beats a Force of Will pretty good. So Force of Will is like the guardian of all the counter spells in Legacy. And if you want to be able to do your thing or defend against something, you always have to beat a Force of Will. So for example, let's say someone plays Show and Tell and you spell pierce the Show and Tell. Well, then your Show and Tell opponent just plays Force of Will to counter your spell pierce, and that's that. That's the end of the story. But how about your opponent plays Show and Tell, and then in response you Flusterstorm it. You get a copy of Flusterstorm because they played the Show and Tell. Now all of a sudden the Force of Will is overloaded. Your opponent cannot play Force of Will on both the copies. So your opponent can't play Force of Will on both the copies of Flusterstorm. So now they're screwed. So that's the one application of Flusterstorm in that situation. It basically guarantees that that instant or sorcery is going to get countered. There's no doubt about that. There's no response, really. It basically should just say counter target instant or sorcery if your opponent doesn't have enough mana. The second application of Flusterstorm is that it's really good against Storm itself. So your opponent tries to play Empty the Warrens, basically Empty the Warrens or any other sort of Storm-like spell, you just counter it outright. So Empty the Warrens, you get 1,000,000 Storm copies. In response, Flusterstorm, counter all those copies. Now, how effective is this going to be in Modern, especially for Modern Merfolk? And Modern Merfolk really shied away from a card called Curse Catcher, which is sacrifice, counter target instant or sorcery unless your opponent pays 1. Now there are a lot of instant and sorcery cards in Modern, but they're really cheap and they're not really all that incredibly dangerous. It's stuff like Manamorphose or Sleight of Hand, Serum Visions, Opt, cards of that like. I mean, there's some decks that aren't even playing any instants or sorceries, like Humans, for example. So, I mean, Flusterstorm will have absolutely no targets. So, what I'm saying is that, the more impactful cards in Modern are things like creatures, like Primeval Titan, Snapcaster Mage, Walking Ballista, things like artifacts, Ensnaring Bridge, engineered explosives, cards like Planeswalkers. We got Jace, the Mind Sculptor, the Teferis, Hero of Dominaria, and Time Raveler. Then there's cards like enchantments, like occasionally enchantments like Worship and Ghostly Prison or something like that. Maybe not so important, but the instants and sorceries, like the only dominating sorcery I can think of is Terminus. But how on earth is your Flusterstorm going to make a really big impact when they miracle the Terminus off the top of their deck at their upkeep? I mean, they're going to have a bunch of open mana, so Flusterstorm not going to be very high impact in that situation. So my evaluation is that Flusterstorm, well, first off, we needed this card a long time ago. We really needed Flusterstorm like 3 or 4 years ago for exactly the Storm decks that existed back then. And even decks like even right now, like Cheerios is a really annoying deck in Modern, and Flusterstorm could be an answer to that. Maybe not. Maybe it's not as perfect as we think, because, you know, Storm decks and Cheerios, they could play Flusterstorm themselves. Don't forget that, you know, they combo off with Grape Shot, you Flusterstorm, and in response they can play their own Flusterstorm. So they can set up a situation where they have Flusterstorm in their hand themselves to counter each copy of your Flusterstorm that you cast. So but overall, I don't know if it's as high impact in Modern, because the Storm decks have already taken a huge hit. Storm decks used to be a problem like 3 to 4 years ago. They were very annoying, but now there are so many different answers, so many different decks that actually easily can beat Storm decks. So Flusterstorm, not as important to beat Storm as we would want it to be, because there's already a wide variety of options. Nobody even talks about Storm anymore. You know, in the past, people always talked about Storm as like one of the more annoying non-game decks in Modern, and that's not even a discussion anymore. People don't even care about Storm as like as a boogeyman in Modern. So do I want to play Flusterstorm myself in Modern Merfolk? 100% I want to have it in my toolbox. But I don't know if I want to be reaching for it as a card right now. Unless Modern changes in a big way, I just don't see the instants and sorceries being that high impact, that being that important to beat in Modern. But I think Flusterstorm is a very unique, powerful card, but I just can't see myself reaching for it right now. It's definitely going to be part of the toolbox. Like, you can't deny what it can do, and you can't deny, you know, at some point maybe Flusterstorm will come back. We're getting more free counter spells. Things like Force of Negation are on their way. We'll talk about that really soon. So Flusterstorm, you know, can beat a Force of Will, so maybe in this case, Flusterstorm can sometimes beat a Force of Negation. But I'm not reaching for it, so you know what? My recommendation is don't go out and buy them. Save your money for the better cards. There's going to be big cards coming out in Modern Horizons. Things have already been spoiled. Really high impact, strong cards. They're going to be really expensive. Save your money for those cards. Wait on Flusterstorm. I'm sure there are some blue decks in Modern. If they don't have the tools to beat a Storm deck, they now do have the tools. But as a Modern Merfolk player, I'm not going to be reaching for Flusterstorm. I think it's a very great, unique card, but it's not something I'm going to want to spend my money on. It's going to be for the toolbox, but I see absolutely no way that I can really use this card today in Modern Merfolk. So I hope that was very informative and useful for all of you. There's a lot more Modern Horizon spoilers on the way. It's going to be really exciting because they're holding back, but they're not really holding back. There's a lot of big changes that are coming along the way. So let's talk about that in the future. This has been Nikachu, Merfolk Master, talking about Flusterstorm being printed from Modern Horizons.